Welcome to Leaders of the West, a podcast for innovators and changemakers. I'm your host, Jessie Jarvis, the founder of the West, and I'm sitting down with agriculturalists, entrepreneurs, executives, and everyone in between with the goal of digging into the strategies, mindsets, and lessons that have been crucial to the success of ag and Western. Whether you're carrying on the next generation of your family's operation, starting something from scratch, or determined to climb up the leadership ladder, we're going to inspire you to continue to dream big, growing not just you, but the future of agriculture and Western as a whole. Let's go. Hello, you guys. Okay, I am very, very excited for today's episode. We're sitting down with Jane Kasper. Jane, I don't really necessarily know how to introduce you, though. You are an email maven, you are a ranch girl, you are a business owner, you're like a multi-passionate entrepreneur, I guess is what people would call you. But we're going to talk about a lot of things because that's what Jane and I do. We are friends in real life. But that being said, today we're really going to focus in on email and the power of email on the marketing side of things. So Jane, tell us a little bit about yourself, growing up on a ranch, your journey through business, and where you're at now.
My name is Jane Kasper, as Jessie said. And we actually met at NFR, I think a week before I moved to Idaho.
Yeah, well, that was like 7 or so years ago, wasn't it?
It was almost 8 because I remember I was just moving up. Peter and I weren't even married yet. And you came in my booth and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm from Idaho. I'm like, I'm moving to Idaho.
I remember that.
It was back before people really started moving there, right? And then now that everyone went there, we're like the salmon going upriver. We're starting a new trend. We came back to California. Yeah, so I grew up in a ranching family in Central California. We were one of the original homesteaders. We're also Mayflower Society babies, which I did not know until last year. I didn't even know that was a thing. So it might be true. It might be false. I don't know. But according to my sister, it's true. And she's my older sister. So you always have to listen to your older siblings, right? And then from there, my passion was just beef. So like feedlots, slaughterhouses. That was actually my jam. Slaughterhouses was what I did for probably like my first 5 years out of college. I was a consultant. I'd go from harvest facility to harvest facility and predominantly food safety type processes and specialized in E. coli. And then switched to animal pharmaceutical, went fishing in Texas, met my husband on a boat and moved to Idaho. We have 2 beautiful children. And while we were in Idaho, when I had Billy, who was our oldest, I was traveling quite a bit for work. And so I had this Etsy shop that had kind of blown up over time. And we slowly transitioned it into a brick and mortar store. And then after my son was born, we took that online business from $180,000 a year to $5 million in 1 year. And it was a roller coaster and it was terrifying. And I made a ton of mistakes along the way. And yeah, so out of that, we had the big slump in our business and we went back and we were trying to save it and figure out how do we actually make this work. And I was listening to a podcast one night about text and email marketing. And this company that was on the podcast, they were talking about their ROI and then what percentage of their business came from email marketing. And at the time, I think we had a 30x ROI on email marketing and it represented maybe 15% of our business. But when you have a 30x ROI, you don't really shake a stick at it, right? You're like, this is great. And they were talking like they had like 150 to 300x ROI. And I thought, man, that's a huge gap. Because I feel like when there's a medium gap, right, you can convince yourself that it's because they do this or I don't know. And then so I was like, God, that's one heck of a gap. So I really started to dig into our email automations. And from there, we actually brought our company back. And ironically, we're doing probably half the revenue we were before with about 4 times the profit. And it taught me so much about our business, but mostly almost 60% of all of our purchases now come from retention marketing, which is text or email. And our ROI on that is now between the 150 and the 200x mark, which I love. I think anybody loves that, right? And so by default, we had, other friends that had e-commerce businesses and they would say like, hey, can you help me with mine? And then slowly it was like people who I didn't know. And they're like, hey, I'm friends with so-and-so who met you through this. And I heard this is what you can help me with. And so out of that came Glow Group. We do mostly email. So Glow Group is our email marketing company. And now we still have Roll Hayes, which is our shoe company. And I kind of split my time between the two. And I love it. I'm very passionate about email marketing. I never thought it would become something that I even gave 2 thoughts about, but here I am.
Oh, well, email is such a powerful tool, and it is one that is not used to its fullest, even though we're at this point where email has been around for how long now? Like, we all know what email marketing is, but it is still just an underused tool. I'll say it again. it doesn't matter who you are who is listening to this, whether you are a retailer of some kind, if you have e-commerce, if you have a personal brand and you want to make a connection with your audience, email is a powerful tool. It truly doesn't matter. If you work for somebody, you're on the sales side, hey, you could work with a marketing team to come up with an email campaign to help on the sales side. Like there is so much value in email. And I love Jane because she is the type of woman who gets into the nitty gritty. And I know that that's exactly what we're going to do today. And I am just so jacked. I wish you guys could see the smile on my face. So let's get into this. Let's go back to the basics because I think that's where we all need to start. Email marketing can really be such low hanging fruit. Give us the basics of email marketing.
Okay. So one of the coolest things about email marketing is the fact that it's owned channel marketing. And owned channel essentially means that you own the whole process, right? So someone comes to your website or someone gives you their email address. From there, you have the ability to email them. When you say like, I want to email them, it lands in their inbox, right? Depending on your deliverability and what your sending practices are, you might go to promotions, you might go to spam. We can talk about that later. But essentially, if you have a list of 1,000 emails and you send an email to 1,000 emails, it will get to the other side, right? Where on Facebook or Instagram, maybe you have, 100,000 followers and you put up a post and you see the number of people who have seen it or maybe 5 or 10,000 because you're at their mercy, right? You're essentially putting that post into the world and telling Instagram, like, we would love it if you would show it to all of these people. But the reality is it doesn't go there. So that's one of the most beautiful things about email marketing is its owned channel marketing. Also, as we talked about, the ROI is insane. Like the cost to send an email is just fractions of a cent, right? So even if you have a product that is a low value product or a low profit product, email is always profitable. So I always think of things from like a triangle. So it's like the triangle of profitability. So the bottom of your triangle there is anything that's organic, right? That you don't have to pay for. So you create an Instagram post and you don't boost it or put any ads behind it. Or Facebook, you have, maybe you're wearing a logo in town, right? So those are organic. Those are the highest ROI you can have because they essentially have no cost, right? The time that it takes. And then your next tier is anything that's between like a 20 and 100x ROI. So that's like your email, your text, your SEO. And then on that top tier, where that point is your paid advertising. So depending on your industry, usually between like a 3 and a 5x ROI on ads is really great. And that's if someone's being somewhat aggressive, right? Because some people could say like, oh, I have a 20x on my ads, but I only spend $5 a day on them. But you're really just hitting your hottest audience, right? The ones that are most likely to purchase. So I always try to keep that triangle in mind. Like if you don't have, a decent website, a decent brand, it doesn't have to be a website, right? Maybe you just have, maybe Rural Haze, like our shoe company. Maybe we don't have a brick and mortar and we don't have a website, but we go to different shows. And that is what we used to do. We didn't have a website for years. We would just travel around to different shows and we would do booths, but we would still take those emails. And then we would send people notifications like, hey, keep a list. Like maybe Jessie shopped with us in 2016 at NFR. And so we send Jessie an email the next year for NFR and say, hey, Jessie, just FYI, we're back. We really appreciate you shopping with us last year. And then that gives her relativity, right? Where she's like, oh, I do know these people. And then say, this is where our booth's going to be this year. I mean, absolute low-hanging fruit, right? Because that also gives her a destination. Because we all know what it's like when you go to NFR and you're like, first off, you have to decide which one to go to.
Oh,
right?
It's absolute chaos.
And then you have this whole debate. And what does it come down to? It comes down to like when you're at breakfast and you're trying to make your hit list and someone says, well, I know that Rodeo Quincy is at the Sands. Well, I mean, that one doesn't exist anymore. And then from there, you decide, okay, well, we're going to go there first and then we're going to go around. So that's a great way to be able to tell all your people like, hey, this is where we are.
Oh, absolutely. And especially when it comes to NFR, so saturated. So you have to stand out doing your marketing ahead of time. If you are somebody who's going to set up at NFR, that is crucial to your success. You cannot not market ahead of time and think that your 10 days at NFR is going to be made while you're there. It is all in the pre-work. And I'm going to get off topic there, but
we had some beef companies that did NFR this year. And what they did was instead of it being farmers market style where you come and you purchase your beef and then you take it home, they sold packages. And so they would say, for instance, like, hey, if you don't have like your Christmas dinner figured out or because during the holidays is a great time to try different types of food. It was someone that previously had a boutique there. They knew did really well. And then their husband wanted to have, they're like, oh, well, too bad there's not a way to sell beef, right? And so what they did was they just sold packages. And they sent an email to their list saying like, hey, we're going to be NFR. We have an NFR special. And they did like a gift box. And then they would say, okay, it's going to ship on December 15 or whatever, which I thought was fascinating.
So genius. So genius. Okay. So let's say that you're not a retailer and you're thinking, man, I don't know that I can make money off of email marketing. Break that myth down and give us the benefits of making email campaigns a priority.
Okay, give me an example.
Somebody with a personal brand.
Give me a different, I'm just kidding. No. Okay, so personal brand. So where would their income sources be? Would that be like paid affiliations, advertising, people putting ads?
Yes,
on their
booking
website?
speaking gigs, things of that nature.
Okay, great. So, okay, let's start with booking speaking gigs. So, for instance, what you could do is have a list of all of your potential people who you would like to have you book, right? And then say, for instance, I go speak at, like, I'm probably going to speak at the Grammys. That's big goals, right? And
Big goals.
so what I'm going to do is after I speak at the Grammys, I'm going to take a couple snippets or I'm going to get any reviews I can. So maybe like Jessie Jarvis is there and she writes on her blog or on her social media, whatever, like just heard from Jane Kasper, absolutely riveting. And so you would take that, make a little graphic of it, right? With you on stage, you with the feedback, or talking about like if you did a training, right? Maybe have like some testimonials of how well the training went, put that in an email and then just say like, would you like to have this type of a response at your next event? Here's the schedule to book, or here's the link to book me, right? And give them validation. Don't just tell them like, hey, I'm available. Say like, hey, I'm available. Here's a specific one that I went to, and here's all the feedback that we got. Like, for instance, if I wanted to come speak at, say, for instance, Leaders of the West as a conference, right? If I wanted to come speak there, I would probably relate it to other Western style conferences I'd been to. So maybe I was a speaker in CBA. And so what I would do is I would have a little sector of people who are in the ag industry. And so, for instance, if I spoke at NCBA, I would be damn sure that Jessie saw that in her inbox, because maybe she's sitting there thinking like, oh, Jane's really great, but like, I don't know if she's going to be totally on point for my business, right? But then if she saw that, she's like, oh, she does get the ag industry and she does get my customer base.
Yes. The way in which you put together an email is so crucial. Can you give us some tips on that?
Oh, okay, it's one of my favorite things in the world. All right, if you have a website, make sure it matches your website. So make sure your logo's in the same spot. Make sure you have 3 headers. Even if you don't have a website, put your logo at the top and then maybe it says like, click here to email me or click to see events. There's always something you can provide people, right? Even if you don't have like a full-blown website, maybe it's just a link to a flyer, or maybe it's, because you could put like those live links where like if someone clicks on it, it'll automatically email them or email you. Like they can just draft the email to go to you. Really any of those things. And then, so you want to have those just 3 categories at the top. Don't do more than 3, max 4, but it has to be clean, right? Small. And then put a graphic right below it. Make sure your graphic has a call to action. It does not matter if you're using any type of an email campaign service, there will be a landing page there. And you can also do the same thing with traditional email, right? It's not ideal. Like we recommend that you have a platform where you can track things. Because for instance, like if I send an email to Jessie from my personal inbox, or my personal email server, I don't know if she's clicked. If she clicked, I don't know what she looked at. But if I send it from Klaviyo, I could tell you exactly what Jessie looked at what time, where she clicked, if she added anything to cart, the pages she was looking at. And then all of a sudden you could set something up where you're like, okay, well, Jessie clicked through and she looked at my speaking schedule, but she has not purchased. So I'm going to follow up with Jessie 2 days later. And I'm going to do like one of those, like where you put like your fingers at your eye and then point them at someone else, right? So I'm going to be like, hey, Jessie, I saw you looking at the scheduling page. What do you need to pull the trigger, right? Find out what their needs are. And then if you have always have a clear call to action in your graphic, because I hope my mom doesn't listen to this, but many people intuitively know that you can click a graphic to get to what that graphic is referring to, right? I can guarantee my mom doesn't know. And also, even the people who do know. So here's a question for you. If you have a graphic and it has just information on it, versus having a graphic that has the information plus a button that says like, click here to schedule. And maybe the button is just a rectangle on the graphic. It's not an actual button, right? Because the whole image is a button. What's the click-through rate difference?
I don't know what the difference is, but I'm going to click the button.
30%.
30% interesting.
More people will click on a graphic that has a call to action on it. Isn't that crazy?
I believe it though, because again, it is calling them to action.
Yeah, it's subconscious. A lot of people don't even realize it. And then similar to that, you want your call, if you have a website, you want your call to action button to match your call to action button on the website. So say, for instance, you have this like really cute pink and white graphic and this like awesome pink button on the graphic, right? or it's like a big star and it says like, click to schedule. And then if someone clicks there and they go to your website and the button that they have to click is black and white, they have a 13% lower conversion rate. And they don't know why. But we ran a huge study on it. And then some friends of ours that work at Pandora, they did the same exact thing for their advertising platform. And they had a 17% decrease in conversion rate. But when you went back and asked those people, like they couldn't tell you why. But I think it has to go with how much we trust.
Interesting.
Freaky, huh?
Okay, so we have your logo, your header, call to actions. What else is crucial in an email?
If you have a product base, put a grid of like your best-selling product at the bottom. If you have a beef company and you're going to farmers markets, or you're going to events, right? Put a banner at the bottom. Create a cool banner in Canva. There's a lot of templates out there you can kind of just, pirate and say like, hey, don't miss this at our farmers at the Visalia Farmers Market every Sunday morning. Or, coming up is our pre-order our ribeye box, pre-order your holiday box. Valentine's, right? Valentine's is coming. Get your gift box here. Another graphic that says like, maybe don't know what to make for Valentine's Day dinner. Click here to get our recipes. And when they click there, then all of a sudden you can track what they did. And you're like, oh, I saw you looking at the recipe. Like they clicked on the recipe for ribeyes, but they didn't buy any ribeyes. So then you can automatically follow up with them and say like, hey, Jessie, I saw you were looking for some dinner inspiration, but didn't quite pull the trigger.
Ooh. One other thing that I think is crucial when it comes to building out an email is the length. Because you don't want to stuff it so full to where people are overwhelmed, but you also have to give them enough information to where they can glean something out of the email and they're going to continue to want to open emails from you.
100%. So on websites, they call it above the fold. Anything that you can see in one screen. In emails, you only want that email to be 2 scrolls. Because what happens, have you ever scrolled to the bottom of your email and you want to unsubscribe and it says view entire email and you're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, it is absolutely annoying.
Yeah, so never make it so long that people will have to click the view entire email to unsubscribe. Because you know what happens then?
Are they going to mark you as spam?
Mark it as spam. If you have an email that is too long, you are 4 times more likely to get marked as spam versus people unsubscribing. And then as people mark you as spam, your deliverability decreases. And then all of a sudden you end up in spam and you end up in promotions.
Oh, okay. So on that topic, what is a good deliverability rate?
Deliverability or open?
All of the above.
Deliverability, 99%. Because you should be cleaning your list. Every month you should go in and say like, who's bounced, and then kick them out. And you can suppress them. You don't have to delete them. So you can still track what they're doing, right? Because maybe Jessie works for the railroad and Jessie can't help herself but to shop during the day when she's supposed to be working. And so her email is jessiejarvis@rr.com. And she bounces every time because railroad.com or rr.com, they're going to get her order confirmation. And they're like, and they're going to kick it back, right? And they're like, Jessie's shopping again. We knew it. And so all those are going to come back as a bounce. And so you're not going to be able to receive that email. And so I want to remove you from anyone who can receive them, right? Because that's going to hurt my deliverability. Your open rate is kind of what dictates, like the majority of your account health is your open rate. So you need to have at least a 35% open rate. If you do not have a 35% open rate, you're not going to the inbox. You're going to be in promotions or you're going to be in spam. And it's based on a weighted average of 90 days. So if you are not above 35%, you can get out of spam, or you can get to a good email health score. But like, for instance, like if you go and you pull the number of people who have bounced and you're like, wow, this is a really high number. That's probably because if your deliverability gets so low, and say, for instance, like I try to send an email to you and I have open rate of 13%. They know that. They're able to say like, well, when she normally sends emails to our domain, she only has an open rate of 13%, which means she's spam. So they're going to put me in spam, or they're going to bounce me. And then it's going to come up and say like, well, Jessie at jessiejarvis.com, like she bounced, but it's because Gmail bounced it. So it's like, it's this whole web. But at the end of the day, if you have above a 35% open rate, you're doing okay. And make sure that you are cleaning your list. Number one, you pay for the amount of people that you have. And so there's no reason to pay for more than you have. And then also because it hurts your deliverability.
Let's talk about click rates. What are some good click rates to have?
Okay, so this depends on the frequency that you send emails, right? If you send emails every single day, you have to expect that your click rate is going to be lower, because if people are wanting to digest information from your platform, they'll be able to do it once or twice a week. If you're sending daily, it'll be lower. So a good click rate, if you're sending once a week or less frequently, you want to have at least a 1% click rate. If you have less than a 1% click rate, it either means that you have not cleaned your list or that You just need to provide better content. Or maybe your content is great, but it doesn't give them direction, right? That comes back to the call to action. Ideally, you would want to have between a 2 and a 4% click-through rate.
Okay, good to know.
If you are a blog, it should be higher. If you're
Okay.
Leaders of the West, I expect 90%.
Ooh, well, I will say of the West, we have like a 65% open rate. So I'm feeling pretty good about our emails. Oh yeah. You guys, I have taken Jane's lessons to heart. Trust me. That is why I'm so beyond thrilled to be bringing her to you guys today, because she is so knowledgeable about something that is often so overwhelming. And all it takes is getting some new knowledge and finding somebody who can really help walk you through the process to make it not so scary and to make it understandable. And we'll get to it, but Jane can even do it for you.
And I feel like there's no group that more appreciates putting lipstick on a pig than farmers and ranchers, right?
Amen to that.
If you can find something you can polish up and it's cheap and can make you money, sold.
Oh, absolutely. Emails. I'm telling you guys, underrated, the most underrated tool in business. What are 3 emails that all businesses should be sending?
Okay.
Or maybe what you would call a flow that they should all have set up.
Okay. Your first email should be your subscriber flow, right? So like I subscribe to Leaders of the West and automatically I get an email from Jessie letting me know the background of Leaders of the West, right? And like how it can serve me. So introduce me to the brand, help me to gain trust in your brand, right? And then just give me like your core product. And then from there, maybe a couple days later, if I haven't submitted or, performed a certain action, then you send another email and say like, we also provide these things, right? Give them a little bit more of your offering. And then also encourage them with how to connect with you. Like, feel free to connect with me on Instagram, Facebook. We have this podcast and just kind of keep going from there. A win back. So even if you don't have something that like you sell online, right? You can track it and say, well, this person hasn't engaged with us in this amount of time. If you sell something online, it's easy. Like say, for instance, you have like a beef subscription box or not even a subscription box. You just know that, okay, my average client, if they buy a steak box, they're going to buy another steak box in, 45 days, right? So have it trigger at 50 because you're like, well, technically, like you should have reordered by now. Maybe it says like, hey, Jessie, go take a look in your freezer. It's getting low, isn't it? There's nothing worse than having to run to the store last minute because right. And I think especially if you live in areas where people are fairly rural, right, that's going to hit home because we've all had that moment where you're like, oh, who wants grilled cheese for dinner? Or like you put the half frozen hamburger in there and you're like sitting there with the smasher. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to use a knife instead. So then you have this like giant knife and you're trying to chop the meat. And then your husband walks in and then he just shakes his head and leaves. And you're like, well, this isn't a good idea.
No. And in my house, guys, there's always going to be one burnt side on that grilled cheese anyways, which is not going to make anybody happy. Okay, so we have your subscriber automation introduction, your win back, and then I know what the next one is going to be, but keep going.
I might surprise you. What's the next one?
I was going to say abandoned cart.
Oh, but what if they don't sell online?
Okay, well, for those who sell online, abandoned cart.
Okay, so there's actually 3 abandons that you should have if you sell online. Abandoned browse, abandoned checkout, and abandoned cart. So what's interesting is your abandoned checkout for every email you send will bring in the most amount of money. But say, for instance, I have 1,000 people that come to my website every day and I have a 3% conversion rate. So I'm going to have 30 people check out. So if my conversion rate is 3%, then my abandoned checkout rate, right? Because there's browse, which is if they look at something, cart if they add it to cart, and then checkout if they abandoned the payment. So my abandoned checkout, there's probably going to be 60 people. It ends up being about twice as many as have purchased. So I can send my email to 60 people and there's going to be quite a few that purchase because they have a really high intent level. But we also have to remember, we love to like, if Jessie comes and abandons a cart, we love to be like 4 hours later, hey, Jessie, here's a 10% off coupon, right? Because that's how we used to do it. Back when we all had AOL, like you could open one window. If you chose to abandon a cart, you were literally abandoning it. But now we have distracted carts. We all have things that we're trying to do. So I don't know, you're in the middle of shopping
and my husband calls and needs help with something. And then I have to put my phone down because I've got to go rescue him from somewhere. And I can't finish checking out those cute pants I wanted.
Let's be real. What's happening is you're sitting in the front seat of the flatbed. Justin's loading the hay. And then you're on Instagram and you're like, oh, I'm going to take a look at these pants. And then all of a sudden he's like, Jessie. And then you get like the boom, boom, boom on the top of the truck, right?
I need your help.
You put down the phone and you kind of casually look around like, well, I wasn't actually doing that. or you're supposed to be driving traction, but you like put the phone down and then you turn off the, like the auto drive because you almost piled it up.
Oh, yeah.
That's a distracted cart, right? You got distracted. And so what you need to have is a message that says like, hey, Jessie, we saw you left these behind. Like, don't give her a discount yet. Make her earn the discount. So what's interesting is the abandoned checkout for those 60 emails you send, a pretty high number will convert, right? That's a percentage. But say, for instance, if you send out an abandoned browse email and you had 1,000 people on your website, that means that 400 people probably have tracking for a product. So if you send an email to those 400 people and your conversion rate is half of what it is for the abandoned checkout, your abandoned browse will actually make you more money because of the sheer number of people
that you've sent it to.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys, see, this is why we have Jane here. Okay, so that was for those who have an e-commerce or a product that they're selling. What email were you going to suggest for those who maybe don't have a product that they're selling?
A thank you email.
Oh, a thank you.
Any type of whatever your product is, right? Maybe it's not a transactional product. So just ensuring that like you have that email that goes out after that provides a little bit more insight to your brand. And then if there's like some type of an effect that product had, like maybe somebody, okay, so leaders of the West, right? Or sorry, jobs of the West. Like say, for instance, someone lists the job, fulfills the job, right? That's not really like a transaction, like you filling the job, right? Doesn't come through the website as a transaction. But what you could do is like send them a thank you. And then maybe in 21 days, you follow up with the person who took the job and say like, hey, how's it going? And then you send a second email. So that's a follow-up to that person, right? They're going to continue to look on Jobs of the West when they want another one. And then you also send a follow-up to the client for Jobs of the West and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know, we just checked in with Kara. She's absolutely loving the position. If you have any feedback in the future for how we can even better serve you, let us know, right? Because then it reminds them. And then it gives them 21 days to test out Kara, right? And so it gives you an opportunity where they're like, hey, actually, we were curious if in the future we could add this to our parameters as well. Or listen, we love what you did with Kara, because no matter what type of business you own, right, you're always thinking about the next hire, even if it's way down the road. And so they're like, actually, that process was great. Like, we've been super happy with Kara. In a couple months, we're planning on doing this. And you're like, okay, great. So then you go in and you go into, your scheduled sends on Gmail. And you just say like, hey, Tom, just following up. Like, I know a couple months ago, or you reference the day, right? On February 8th, we chatted and you mentioned that in 3 months, I know we're a couple weeks early, but I was curious if there's any way that we could help you.
And two, it is so much easier to keep a customer retained than it is to go find a new one. It is so much more affordable. Your customer retention is absolutely huge.
100%. Yeah.
The other thing that you can do if you're not if you are a product-based business, you absolutely could do this. But if you're not, that we do is a survey too. So like after somebody's job has expired off the site, we assume that they have hired, we send a survey. How was the process? What would you like us to have done better? What was amazing about it? Because that insight is so valuable as to how you're able to consistently change. If you see a common thread in your survey answers, then okay, we've got to fix this because this affects a lot of people. And if we change it, we could have a positive impact there. Okay, the other thing that Glow Group does very, very well, and you lightly mentioned it, but I want to dig into it just a little bit because, again, completely underused tool in marketing is text. Give us the basics on text marketing.
All right, text marketing, incredibly powerful, incredibly regulated.
And I would also add to that, not necessarily right for everybody. Email marketing, right for everybody. Text, it's not as affordable necessarily. So you've got to ensure that you have a way to make money off of it, is what I would add. But continue on.
Be respectful of the inbox, right? Don't blow me up 3 times a day. Just
no.
Don't do it. And also, number one, it's illegal. And there's some really great platforms you can email and text from. Like Klaviyo is what we use. We love it. And it's also very compliant. So you could set that email and say, send the email out for everybody, maybe send 2. And then you can create a segment for if somebody had been sent this email but didn't open it. Because I would rather pay fractions of a cent versus 1 cent.
Yes. And let's talk real quick. What is the average open rate when you send a text?
This is one of my pet peeves.
Okay. Well, we don't have to answer that question.
Okay. So this is actually one of the text industry's favorite phrases. They'll say like, well, we generated this much income on this campaign because these people opened it. You can't track an open, but it's data that they put everywhere. There's a 99% open rate.
Oh,
That's not true. You can track if someone has been sent something. You cannot track if they open, but you can track if they click. So a good click rate is between 3 and 7%. And let me tell you, the conversion rate on a click with text is about 3 times higher than a conversion rate with click on email.
ooh.
But weed those people out. Go in and say, like, if I have sent this person 70 texts and they've clicked 0, take that entire list and kick them out. They don't deserve your time or your money.
That is one thing that we haven't dug into, and that is, unlike email, you're typically paying per contact per month. In text, you are paying per contact every time you send a text. So it is much more expensive than your traditional email marketing.
100%. So with email, you're really paying for the platform, right? You're paying them for their ability to integrate or their ability to build an email. With text messaging, you're paying for the actual text. And so that's why a lot of them are very similarly priced, because the cost to them is essentially the same. They all go through a parent company called Twilio.
So for some backstory, you guys love my, hey, you should take some beef out for dinner reminder. And I was like, man, that would be so cool if I could just text people at like 10 in the morning every so often and give them that reminder or send them a quote or something fun. But every time I send that, if I have a list of 1,000 people and I want to send 3 texts a week, that is a very expensive thing. And I'm not necessarily getting anything in return from that. I'm doing it as a favor, as a friendly thing, but I'm not making money off reminding you to go take something out for dinner. So text was off the market. In fact, if you've ever said, man, Jessie, you should send a text about that, trust me, I looked into it a lot. Not very feasible on my end. But continue on.
Have a beef company.
Yeah, exactly. If you have a beef company, I mean, it's fine. Take my idea. I won't get mad about it. But yes, you have to have a product to sell in order to really make text affordable.
And it doesn't have to be like a truly transactional product, right? Like maybe it's 10 in the morning and you're like, hey, time to take out your beef. Stuck with a recipe, or don't know what to cook, or, need a quick recipe with some basics that my family loves. Click below. Because then they're going to click on the recipe, right? Maybe they already have the beef. Maybe they don't need the beef. They're going to click on the recipe and they're going to get cookied. And then in that recipe, maybe you have an automation set up where someone looked at a recipe but didn't purchase. And then all of a sudden, that person is willing and warm. And so you can follow up with them on email, which is a lot cheaper.
Yes, exactly. Okay, last thing that we're going to talk about text, and then I want to get to the rapid fire round, and that is, I know this is your favorite thing to talk about. Text marketing has a lot of stipulations, and if you're not aware of those, you're breaking the rules, and it can be, I'm just going to say it, towing the line of danger. Let's tell the people why it's so dangerous.
Give the people what they want. Let me just tell you, I feel like most people think that I'm a fairly happy person. And then when I get on the calls and I'll be like, hey, I noticed you sent all these out. They're like, wow, I kind of liked you a lot better before we did this. So sorry in advance. But there's really just 3 big ones. So, and I always equate it to, I'm sure Alan was this way growing up. When you would sit down at the dinner table, he'd take the phone off the hook because you just knew someone was going to call. And then my dad's a pretty quick guy. He likes things done quickly, efficiently. He chews fast, he eats fast. And one of his pet peeves was when dinner would take too long. And so all of a sudden, if you heard the phone going, dang, 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 he'd be like, well, dinner's over. Like that meant it was too long. But it's because of telemarketers, right? So Ronald Reagan put into place TCPA compliance. And TCPA compliance, essentially what it does is it helps to protect us from, getting text messages really late at night or early in the morning or, back to back. And obviously, text messaging wasn't around when Ronald Reagan put TCPA compliance into place, but it does fall under telephone marketing. And so therefore, it falls under TCPA. There are different regulations for essentially like if I'm going to send out a campaign, right? So say, for instance, I got a new run of Ariat in and it says like, hey, Jessie, Dixons are back, click below. So if it's a promotional message, they consider it campaigns. If it's a promotional message, I can't send that outside the times of 8 a.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern. If it's a transactional message, like if you logged onto my website and you purchased a pair of Dixons, you can get that transactional message, like order confirmed. Like you put in there that you wanted order notifications and say, for instance, you purchased at 10 p.m., then my system can automatically send you something in response to what you did.
Right, because you basically agreed to the terms when you said, I want a text notification. Well, yeah, you're going to get them.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the crazy thing is, It's actually based on where the person is, not where they're from. Currently, I live in the Pacific time zone, but I might be, if say, for instance, if I purchased on your website when I lived in Idaho and you went to send out a text and you said, well, it's 7 p.m. or it's, maybe it's 7 a.m., but it's 8 a.m. where you are, right? So it's 8 a.m. Idaho time. And you're like, actually, I'm fine. It's like 8:15. I'll send out my text just to people who are in, mountain time zone, central, eastern. So I'm going to get that text because when I put in my address, I was mountain time, but now I'm Pacific. So you're texting me at 7:15 in the morning.
And that is illegal. And I could get a fine.
100%. And so, but the crazy thing is like, maybe I'm traveling to, I live in Pacific, but I'm traveling to Florida. So you text me at 5, but you actually texted me at 8.
Yeah. What happens if you're in Europe and it's like the middle of the night?
The international kind of falls off because
okay, good.
Right.
Okay. So yeah. And then you also cannot send texts on Sundays and holidays. Is that correct?
Yeah. So not for all states, but once again, you don't know where they are. Yeah. So no text on Sundays or holidays, not more than 2 texts per day. And in many states, not more than 1 text per day. And that's within a 24-hour period. So just best practice, 1 text for every 24 hours. You have to have your name in it. It has to have your company name if you're sending to the United States. It has to have a number that they can text back to.
Okay. So not one of those short code numbers.
So you can technically be texted back on a short code. But like, say, for instance, you have a system where you can only send out messages and you can't actually receive them back and respond.
Oh, okay. Got it.
It's no longer legal. And a short code, you can't have a shared short code. So you have to have your own short code. So about 2 years ago, we were all able to pop it on the same one. Like, say, for instance, your boutique would be like, text 546 to 37102. And mine would be text 792 to 37102. That's a shared short code, the 37102. And so there were some short codes are expensive. So all these providers are like, well, you can use my code and you can use my code. It was like Oprah, right? Like everyone gets a puppy. And then all of a sudden TCPA is like, you can't do that. And they're like, you can't have my code and you can't have my code. So now everyone has these long codes. And I would say lastly, like make sure it's easy for people to opt in. On your website, wait 7 seconds and say, hey, sign up here for, give an incentive like free recipes, 10% off, or just to like be in the know, right? Anything. You don't have to provide value, but it does increase the opt-in rate. Maybe you don't have a website and you sell at farmers markets, right? Make a little QR code like, hey, scan here to join our text club, scan here to join our email club. And maybe you only have like 30 or 50 people on your email list. You don't need a platform. You could just send them an actual email, but don't abandon it because email is so cheap and so effective. And they could search their inbox and find it like that.
Oh, absolutely. I am so thrilled by what everybody learned today. I know that I can't imagine that there's not a listener who didn't learn some little kind of nugget. But let's get to the rapid fire round. What is the best piece of business or personal advice you've ever been given?
Make the best of everything or it will make the worst of you. This brings to mind the Croc Spurs that I sent you that I've noticed that you have not used.
I have never put those Crocs on my feet. I have never installed my spurs on my Crocs. Guys, I'm anti-Croc. Very, very anti-Croc. Not doing it. If you could give people any words of wisdom and you knew they would take them to heart, what would it be?
These two conflict. One is trust your gut, and the other is live in your numbers. For a long time, so a lot of my background was sales. And when we blew up, I like pushed. And I just, every morning I'd wake up and I'd look at the app and I'd look at my sales number. And like every hour, like I knew exactly where I was. I could tell you exactly how much I did that year every month. But in the past, like my job was just to sell, right? And I did, but I didn't know my profit the way I should have. And like, I look back at the amount of sales that we did in 2018, 2019. I mean, I should have been swimming in it. I should have been driving a Lamborghini. And well, I don't know that the state would have given me one, a record. But like I said this earlier, what we do now is so much less than what we did before, but we're much more profitable. And because of that, I sleep better. Because of that, there's nights where I'm at the warehouse and I'm like, I should stay late. And like, but you know what? I'm not going to. Or, you have young kids too. I think if I almost feel like the world put me through that because I wasn't waking up to the fact that I wasn't living my life, like not even like the way I should, but the way I thought I would be. Right. I envisioned that when I had children, I'd be home making dinner every night. I love to cook. That's like my, I don't know, that's my love language. I'd love to have a full table and drink wine and talk loud as I'm cooking for people. But I wasn't doing that. And I think I kept thinking like, well, once this part's done, or once I get this done, or once I hit this goal, right? And then I kept hitting these goals. And there's this client of ours, and he always says, you're skipping the champagne. Like if you make a goal for the month, and then by the 20th of the month, you've exceeded it. So then you set this crazy goal. The chances are you're not going to sit there and celebrate on the 20th, right? That's not what we do. That's not people who are entrepreneurs or self-starters or drivers. We don't sit there and celebrate them. And his whole thing was like, yeah, you can make another goal, but on the 20th, you better be popping a bottle, making a cake. Like it doesn't matter what it is. Do something that celebrates what you're actually doing. And I feel like the world kind of was like, hey, you need to, you kind of need to bring your world right. And then I was like missing dinner. I was missing everything. Like I wasn't living the life I wanted to, but I had this huge company and all these warehouses. And I was like so proud of what I did. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, like I wasn't listening. And it's like the world's like, you're fine. We'll force you to, right?
Yes. Not all growth is good growth.
Oh,
it's hard to see that when you're on the inside of it too. But yeah, no, not all growth is good growth.
Yeah. And when someone tells you like, this will be a blessing in disguise in the back of your head, you're like, that's the last thing you want to hear, right? Like, tell me what I've learned. And then looking back, like I didn't know my numbers. I knew my sales numbers, but I didn't know, like I could tell you exactly how much every package that goes out our door costs right now. I could tell you the cost of the string that goes on the package, the cost of the tissue, the cost of the cost of the tissue per each box, right? We have to use 2 sheets for the larger boxes. And I think like I just sleep better. I feel like I have more control. So know your numbers, and not the fake ones that you decide exist like I did.
If you could go to dinner with anybody dead or alive, who would you pick?
I would like to meet Queen Isabella.
I'm going to sound like an idiot. Who's Queen Isabella?
Queen Isabella is the one that funded Christopher Columbus's expedition to the New World.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, there were a lot of queens, so it's not my fault that I maybe didn't know all of them.
So really, if you think about it in today's verbiage, she's an angel investor, right?
She absolutely would be, because that's how America came to be. Okay, that's a good one. Obviously, you're the first person who's ever said that. Okay, last question. Let's talk about your favorite things. Do you have a favorite book or a podcast, a service maybe, or like a life hack that you think more people need to know about?
Okay, book. There's a book called Super Bosses. And I myself am just kidding. The book it does case studies of like certain industries, right? So essentially a super boss is one that can transform an industry. So they create leaders that don't necessarily like only stay at their company, but that go off to lead other sectors of that industry. For instance, like Steve Jobs, and actually Larry Ellis of Oracle, a lot of the people in Silicon Valley that are in much higher tiered positions at one point worked directly below those people. And then there's this head coach in the NFL that almost nobody knows about. But then if you look at the last 30 Super Bowls, it's something like 25% of the head coaches of the teams that were playing in the Super Bowl actually had been this guy's assistant coach. It's fascinating.
Okay. Super Bosses. We're going to link that in the show notes for those of you who want to read that or listen to it.
And it's one of those, like, do you have books where you just go every couple of years, You'll read it again? I always highlight my books. It kills my husband. He won't let me dog ear a page. I read them in the bath. I drop them. There's highlighter. It's just a mess. And he's like, I don't know, like, how can you do this if it's important to you? I'm like, because it's meant to be consumed, right? So as I read the book, I've read it a couple of times, and like different things I feel like come out in different chapters. My favorite podcast is How I Built This by Guy Raz. It's like different case studies of all these businesses that were founded and then blew up. And then he has another one called Wisdom from the Top. Have you listened to that one?
No.
So Wisdom from the Top is, okay, so for How I Built This is everything from like Kate Spade to American Airlines to, just anything, like how the brand is built. And then Wisdom from the Top, he interviews CEOs. They're almost like serial CEOs, right? So people who have been, maybe a CEO of Titleist and Pepsi and all these different like big companies. And it's kind of case studies on the person, not necessarily the company. It's fascinating.
Okay, we're going to link all of that in the show notes. And then one thing, Jane, that we have not really mentioned yet is obviously you run Glow Group. If somebody wants to get in contact with Glow Group, if they want to have you guys set up their email flows or do anything in regards to retention marketing, how can they connect with you guys?
So we have our website, glow-group.com. And you can also just Google us, Glow Group, will come up. And I can actually give Jessie a link if you guys would like to schedule a call. We have free consultations and we do it on Zoom so we can kind of screen share. And so regardless of where you are, we have clients that do fashion. We have clients that do beef. We have clients that do, we have a lot of beef and meat clients. We have some that don't even have a website, but they have a brand of some kind. And so really, and even if you aren't someone who is in a place where you can get flows, right? Automations or anything like that, we would still love to chat because I think that, a rising tide raises all. So I'll give Jessie the link to schedule a meeting and you guys are more than welcome just to make that link a free for all. We would love to talk to you, love to help you in any way that we can. If we're not the right fit, our industry itself is pretty close. And so I can almost guarantee we can find you somebody who is.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, I'll make sure that we include that link in the show notes as well. Jane, thank you so much. I value you as a friend and as a businesswoman, and I am so thankful that we were able to share all of your knowledge and wisdom with everybody else today. If you had something that you were just absolutely amazed by, please do us a favor, drop it in your stories, tag Of the West, tag Jane, Glow Group, Rural Haze, whoever it is. We want to hear from you. We want to know what resonated with you most. And as always, we will see you guys back here next week.
If you loved this episode, do us a favor and share it with someone else who might find just as much value in it as you did. We're on a mission to continue to grow and strengthen the future of agriculture and Western industries, and you spreading the word helps us make more of a positive impact. It also makes a big difference when you take a minute to go rate and review the show. We can't thank you enough for listening, for sharing, and for loving Ag and Western as much as we do. We'll see you back here for our next episode.